Picture the Earth not as the vibrant blue planet we know today, but as a silent, frozen world. No forests waving in the wind, no oceans carrying life, no sound of birds, insects, even a gentle breeze. Just endless sheets of ice stretching across the entire globe. This wasn't a seasonal winter or an ice age. It was a total planetary freeze that swallowed Earth for nearly 100 million years. Scientists call this era Snowball Earth, a time when our planet was locked in ice from pole to pole. Temperatures plunged, oceans froze over. Life, already fragile and primitive, was pushed to the brink of extinction. It was a global crisis unlike anything we could imagine. And yet, within that frozen silence, refused to give up. It clung to survival in hidden pockets, adapting, enduring, and waiting. Out of that harsh and lifeless world, evolution found a way forward. Without this unimaginable chapter in our planet's past, we, humans, animals, trees, oceans, everything alive today, might never have existed. So today, we ask, why was the Earth totally frozen for 100 million years? And more importantly, what can this ancient story teach us about survival, resilience, the miraculous ability of life to rise even from the harshest conditions? Let's unravel something extraordinary and, frankly, almost unbelievable. There was a moment in Earth's history when this planet, our only home in the vast emptiness of space, completely froze. Not partially, not a harsh winter, totally frozen. From continent to continent, across mountains and seas, the world turned into a gigantic spinning snowball. And the question that haunts scientists, philosophers, anyone curious enough to look up at the stars and ask, why? Is simple. How on earth does a living planet freeze solid? What force is powerful enough to silence oceans and smother continents in ice for millions of years? The answer is both fascinating and disturbingly relevant to each of us today. Sphere broke. The balance failed. Nature's thermostat misfired in the most catastrophic way. Imagine for a moment the most violent volcano you've ever seen in a documentary. Exploding, fire launching into the heavens, the very ground trembling as if the earth itself is angry. Now multiply that by thousands. Not a handful of eruptions. A planetary tantrum lasting tens of millions of years. Volcanoes tearing through the crust, mountains rising, continents ripping apart like old paper. It was chaos on an unimaginable scale. And with every eruption, with every mountain exposed to wind and rain, an invisible thief began pulling carbon dioxide out of the sky. Gas, Keol, is not just exhaust from our cars or flights. It's the invisible blanket that keeps Earth warm enough for oceans to exist, for forests to grow, for life to breathe and multiply. Remove enough of it, and the world loses its warmth, bit by bit, degree by degree, until one day the tipping point arrives, and suddenly winter wins. That's what happened. Nature accidentally turned down its own heat, not because of a single disaster, but because of a slow, relentless geological strategy. Continents drifted, volcanoes erupted, mountains sprouted like teeth from the crust, fresh rock met rain, minerals reacted with carbon dioxide, and the planet's atmosphere began to thin of its heat, holding gas. No calm, no warmth, no liquid oceans. No oceans, no weather cycles or life as we know it. Picture this: you're in a warm room on a bitter winter night. Gradually, inch by inch, someone pulls the blankets off you. First one layer, then another. At first you shiver, then your teeth chatter, then suddenly you're unable to move. That's what Earth experienced. Didn't freeze because of one big catastrophe. It froze because its blanket was slowly stolen. And once temperatures dropped past a certain threshold, the planet didn't just get cold, it plunged headfirst into an icy abyss. Scientists estimate temperatures may have fallen to 50 degrees C in places, oceans sealed under kilometers of ice. Sunlight bounced off a reflective white surface back into space, worsening the chill. Think about that. We complain when winter overstays its welcome by a month, when frost covers the car windshield in the morning, when a cold snap forces us to delay a barbecue. Now imagine 100 million years of frozen silence. But here's where it gets compelling on a human level, because history, even Earth's deep history, always circles back to us. We tend to believe we're invincible. Planet is stable, dependable, predictable. We assume the world will always bounce back because it always has. We go about our lives, sipping coffee, scrolling through screens, driving to places, convinced that whatever climate we inherit, we can simply adjust, build a thicker jacket, turn the thermostat up, invent another gadget. Yet there was a time when the planet itself proved otherwise, when it said, without apology, I don't bend for you. You adapt to me, you die. And there it is, the knife-edge truth we often ignore. Earth doesn't owe us comfort. It doesn't owe us stability. What happened hundreds of millions of years ago isn't just scientific trivia. It's a reminder, a warning wrapped in ice, because that ancient freeze began with a slow, subtle imbalance in the atmosphere, a shift in gases invisible to the naked eye. It didn't come with fireworks or global announcements. It crept in quietly, patiently, until one day the world tipped past the point of no return. Sound familiar? We live in a time when the opposite is happening, where we're adding too much carbon instead of losing it. Some shrug and say, what's the big deal? Nature will handle it. It always does. Really? Nature handled it last time by freezing the entire planet solid for longer than humans have existed. That was nature's reset button. And let's be brutally clear, didn't care who lived here at the time. Life was a fragile experiment, nothing like the smart, ambitious, stubborn creatures we are now. But even today, atmosphere slips too far in one direction or the other. Nature won't negotiate with us. It won't pause because we're clever or sentimental or technologically advanced. It won't say, well, humans have built cities and art and culture. Perhaps we'll go easy on them. No. Nature will simply do what physics demands. Chemistry doesn't compromise. Climate doesn't plead. You change the formula, you change the world, sometimes forever. There's a strange comfort in the arrogance of our species. We like to believe we are different, that we can bend the rules, that we can live as if we are spectators, not participants in Earth's story. If a planet can freeze itself for 100 million years because its atmosphere slipped slightly out of balance, do we really think we get a free pass? Let's not spiral into fear. That's too easy and frankly too lazy. Fear rarely changes people. Understanding does. Perspective does. A sense of responsibility and awe does. The world froze long before we existed, and life survived in ways that defy imagination. Tiny microbes huddled near volcanic vents, in cracks under ice, chemical pockets barely warm enough to keep DNA intact. They didn't thrive. They endured, clinging to existence like fingers gripping the edge of a cliff. And when warmth returned, didn't just return, it exploded. Complexity emerged. The frozen test created the spark for evolution that would eventually lead to creatures that walk and think and question. Here's the uncomfortable but empowering truth: global crises, whether ancient ice ages or modern climate anxieties, reveal who survives, who adapts, who learns, who refuses to give up. Ancient volcanic chaos wasn't punishment. It was process, nature experimenting. Earth recalibrating, balance breaking and being rebuilt again. It's terrifying and inspiring all at once. If this planet can endure a frozen eternity, If life can survive in microscopic whispers under crushing ice, then what excuse do we have to fold when life throws problems at us? Society polarizes, when economies shake, when personal struggles freeze our confidence and test our patience. The story of our frozen planet is not simply science. It's a mirror, a reminder that strength isn't loud, survival isn't glamorous, resilience isn't comfortable. The Earth's lowest point became its rebirth. And in that sense, Snowball Earth isn't just a geological event. It's a lesson in patience, humility, and persistence. Think about your own struggles. The days that feel like emotional winter. The moments when life feels stalled, frozen, unmoving. When you wake up and feel no progress, no warmth, no hope. If the Earth itself sat frozen for millions of years before life surged forward again, maybe your frozen season is not failure. Maybe it's preparation. Maybe the silence is a setup for strength. Maybe the pause is a prelude to a breakthrough. That's not poetic comfort. It's universal truth. Nature teaches through experience, not speeches. Evolution, not encouragement. The planet froze, life held on, and eventually everything changed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Ancient volcanoes that triggered Snowball Earth didn't intend destruction. They unleashed transformation. And while we stand here millions of years later, breathing air and shaping cities and debating futures, the planet offers us the same message: balance matters. Patience matters. Awareness matters. Everything begins quietly. The cooling, the crisis, the recovery. Big changes don't always kick down the door. Sometimes they whisper, accumulate, and wait for a single moment to reveal their magnitude. So, yes, a frozen planet began with volcanic chaos and lost carbon. But the real truth buried in that ice is not about rocks or chemistry. It's about how fragile greatness begins. Powerful forces work, slowly, invisibly, until suddenly the world changes and you're left standing at the edge of history saying, "Did we not see this coming?" Now imagine what we could achieve as individuals, as a species, if we learned from that ancient winter. If we understood that every small choice, every gradual shift, every invisible action matters. If we recognize that the world can freeze or flourish depending on what we do next, not someday, but now. Earth froze because balance broke. It thawed because balance returned. And somewhere in that rhythm lies our greatest lesson: nothing changes all at once until it does. So the real question isn't why the Earth froze. The real question is, what will we do before our own tipping point arrives? More importantly, what kind of world will we choose to unfreeze within ourselves? If the first blow to Earth's warmth came quietly, carbon slipping away, temperatures dipping, then the second phase was nothing short of relentless, merciless, unstoppable momentum. Once the ice began its march, it didn't politely ask permission, didn't pause to negotiate with the atmosphere or consider the feelings of whatever tiny life forms clung to existence. Ice does not care. Cold is not compassionate. The planet crossed an invisible line, and suddenly the world found itself spiraling into a trap of its own making. And here's the astonishing part. It wasn't one dramatic event, killer comet, one apocalyptic eruption. No, it was something much simpler, almost deceptively innocent, sunlight bouncing off ice, a reflection, a mirror effect. That's all it took to send the Earth into a chain reaction so powerful it locked the planet in ice for millions of years. You might be tempted to laugh at how mundane that sounds. Reflection. Ice being shiny. It sounds almost childlike in its simplicity until you realize that this quiet mechanism nearly erased the possibility of life as we know it. Picture the first stretches of ice moving across land and sea. Snow piling up, oceans glazing over, and as the white surface grew, more sunlight bounced back into space. Less heat was absorbed. The cooling intensified. Ice created more ice. Cold created more cold. A self-reinforcing prison built one flake at a time. Tiny, fragile crystals, multiplied across a planet, became a juggernaut. That's how the world works sometimes. Catastrophe rarely roars in as a giant monster. More often it creeps in one small choice, one small moment, one small shift at a time, until suddenly you're buried, overwhelmed, and wondering how everything fell apart so quietly. Isn't that a painfully familiar truth? How many lives unravel, not because of one big decision, but because of tiny ones stacking up? The text you didn't answer, apology you didn't make, the habit you put off fixing, the routine you slipped from, occasionally, to always. And before you know it, you're living in emotional winter, wondering when the warmth left. Earth didn't just freeze, it spiraled. And spirals don't ask your opinion before dragging you down. They accelerate, they compress, they corner you. Once ice spread across the oceans, the reflectivity, or albedo, as scientists call it, surged. The planet became brighter, shinier, more reflective. Sunlight that once nourished oceans, warmed currents, and kept climate systems alive was now ricocheting uselessly back toward space. If Earth had a face, it wasn't soaking up sunshine. It was staring blankly into the void and turning pale with cold. The terrifying thing about feedback loops is how harmless they seem at first. Feel like emergencies until it's too late. The first thin film of ice on a pond means nothing to the fish beneath. The first chill in the wind feels refreshing. The first early frost almost looks beautiful, but push past the threshold and the small becomes unstoppable. That's what happened to the planet. And I want you to really absorb this. The world didn't freeze because of one moment. It froze because a small thing was allowed to grow big. And what a brutal metaphor this planet handed us. How many relationships freeze the same way, not in one argument, but in gradual silence? How many dreams die not from one failure, but from postponed effort, postponed belief, postponed courage? How many people wake up one day feeling emotionally cold, not because something broke loudly, but because warmth faded quietly? Astonishing how nature mirrors the human spirit when you pay attention. Now imagine you were alive then, not as a human, because we didn't exist yet, one of the microscopic pioneers of life, once surrounded by liquid oceans, now sealed under slabs of ice, light barely trickling through, food scarce, energy scarce. World didn't just become difficult, it became nearly impossible. Every day was a battle against nature's indifference. Every moment was a negotiation with extinction. Most life forms lost. But a stubborn few clung to vents in the ocean floor, where heat still escaped from Earth's core. Others hid in cracks, in sheltered pools, in whatever tiny refuge remained unfrozen. Isn't that the story of survival always? When the world gets cold, warmth doesn't disappear. It becomes precious, rare, hidden. You must look deeper for it. You must protect it. Sometimes you must create it yourself. We romanticize resilience as triumphant, glorious, cinematic. But real resilience is shivering in the dark, unseen, unheard, whispering to yourself that you will not go extinct. It's not glamorous. It's gritty. It's stubborn hope against overwhelming odds. Let's bring this closer to home. We love the idea of being strong, but we hate the conditions that require strength. Everyone wants to be a survivor. Nobody wants to face the storm. One talks about growth. Nobody wants to feel the growing pains. Everyone wants resilience. Nobody wants the cold season, where resilience is forged. The Earth's story tells us something uncomfortable. Warmth doesn't create strength. Cold does. Pressure does. Scarcity does. Struggle does. The ice didn't just freeze oceans. It revealed which forms of life were capable of enduring. It tested commitment to existence. It separated what was fragile from what was unbreakable. And without that test, complex life might never have emerged. The world we know, forests, animals, intelligence, art, emotion, is a product of surviving cold, not basking in comfort. So, when you feel your life entering a cold period, remember this planet's history. Cold does not mean the end. Sometimes cold is the crucible. Sometimes the ice is not the barrier. It's the invitation to evolve. Let's consider another lesson the frozen Earth hands us. Momentum can be a blessing or a curse. Once ice began spreading, nothing could stop it. The same is true in our personal lives. Momentum is neutral. It amplifies direction. If you're moving toward discipline, every day compounds progress. If you're slipping into complacency, every day compounds decay. A habit repeated is a future rehearsed. The planet rehearsed cold and got an ice age. We rehearse our futures daily, often without realizing it. The smallest actions become the biggest outcomes. There's something almost poetic about how silent and patient this process was. Dramatic explosion, no sudden roar, just cold creeping across the surface, planting itself, expanding, feeding its own strength. That's how self-doubt spreads. That's how cynicism grows. That's how apathy conquers ambition. Quietly, gradually, until your spirit wakes up one day surrounded by ice and wonders how it let itself freeze. And then humanity repeats that cycle socially. Polarize. We turn colder to each other. Compassion thins. People choose outrage over understanding, ego over humility, pride over connection. A little bitterness here, a little cynicism there. Soon enough, humanity becomes its own snowball, reflecting warmth away instead of absorbing it, refusing kindness because pride gets in the way, bouncing empathy off like cold sunlight on ice. But if cold can spread, warmth can too. Warmth is contagious, but only if someone dares to spark it first. Life survived Snowball Earth because it clung fiercely to pockets of warmth. Likewise, change in a frozen world begins with someone deciding to stay warm when everything encourages coldness, to remain humane when it would be easier to be hardened, to choose optimism when cynicism feels fashionable, to keep caring when indifference is the trend. Do you think microbes in the ancient deep oceans had time to complain about how unfair the world was? No. They adapted. They innovated. They found ways to use sunlight more efficiently, to store energy more cleverly, to cling to life more stubbornly. We romanticize evolution, but the truth is it's born from hardship. Progress is rarely comfortable. Growth rarely happens in perfect temperatures. The miracle of life didn't happen under ideal circumstances. It happened in survival mode. That's where breakthroughs begin. And yes, sometimes when life tests you, it's not personal, it's preparation. The Earth wasn't targeted by fate. It simply crossed a scientific threshold, and we too crossed thresholds of emotion, stress, of difficulty. Some moments feel inescapable, crushing, permanent. But remember, even the planet didn't stay frozen forever. Seasons of life are just that, seasons. Seasons change, often just when you believe they won't. But the deeper message of this ancient freeze is about responsibility. Once Earth began reflecting sunlight instead of absorbing it, nature didn't step in to save itself until millions of years later when volcanoes eventually pumped carbon back into the sky. There was no quick rescue, no miracle save. Nature followed physics, feelings. Translation: there is no cavalry coming for you. You are the cavalry. Waiting doesn't thaw anything. Action does. Perspective does. Persistence does. When your life starts reflecting possibilities instead of absorbing them, when you bounce away opportunities, support, warmth, growth, you freeze yourself. The only way back is participation. Warmth comes through movement. Momentum only changes when you do. Nature makes no exception for excuses, nor does success, nor does transformation. While the world was freezing, tiny living cells were working, adapting, clinging. They didn't say, "This isn't fair." They said, "Survive first, thrive later." And, because they did, exist. You are not here because life was easy for your ancestors. You are here because they endured. Life doesn't reward comfort. It rewards continuation. Didn't kill everything. It revealed what deserved to persist. That may be harsh, but truth often is. The coldest times in your life will not destroy you if you refuse to surrender. Sharpen you, strengthen you, clarify you. And eventually, when warmth returns, and it does, you will not be the same. You will be transformed by the freeze, not defeated by it. The planet learned that small changes matter. Momentum matters. Reflection, literal and metaphorical, matters. And so do you. So when the world grows cold around you, when progress feels frozen, when the future feels distant and unreachable, do not mistake stillness for failure. Even in ice, life was quietly preparing for a future it could not yet see, only needed one thing: the refusal to disappear. Life at this stage in Earth's frozen history was not thriving. Let's make that brutally clear. There were no forests breathing, no oceans swirling with colors, no creatures stalking across land. Life had been pushed to the very edge of existence. If you truly imagine it, not as a scientific chapter, but as a lived moment, it becomes humbling. There were no guarantees, no safety net, no promise of everything will be all right. The Earth had turned its back on warmth, and life was left to fend for itself in a world that literally did not care if it survived. We love to tell stories about life being resilient, as if resilience is glamorous, as if it's a heroic speech, a victorious moment, a triumphant soundtrack. But this era wasn't heroic, was desperate. Resilience here wasn't a choice. It was instinct. It wasn't about thriving. It was about clinging on by fingertips to the cliff edge of extinction. Imagine being trapped in a room with windows sealed, breath condensing, light fading, and every hour gets colder. You don't run, you don't fight, you just endure. That's exactly what early life did. It retreated. It hid. It tucked itself into the shadows of volcano-heated cracks at the bottom of oceans, in tiny warm pools beneath ice too thick to break. It didn't complain, didn't collapse into despair. It simply refused to vanish. And that refusal, that raw, instinctive persistence, became the seed of everything that would eventually walk, swim, speak, dream, build, and imagine. And isn't that the most uncomfortable truth about growth? We think progress comes from comfort, but comfort rarely builds anything meaningful. Strength doesn't grow in ease. It grows in exile. Courage does not bloom in applause. It blooms in isolation. Hope isn't born when times are good. It's born when darkness presses so hard against your ribs that you think you'll suffocate, and yet something inside whispers, "Not yet." Still here. People often look at their struggles as if they're punishment, as if hardship means we've been forgotten or abandoned by life. But look at that ancient world. The planet froze, and yet the spark of life did not flicker out. It endured. It adapted. It found warmth in impossible places. Sometimes survival itself is the triumph, not the victory parade afterward. A lesson buried under that ancient ice. When everything collapses, you learn what cannot be taken from you. When life strips away comfort, routines, certainty, applause. What remains is the raw core of who you are, and that's where strength is built. You don't know your capacity until the world tests you. Don't know your stamina until you're forced to hold on longer than is reasonable. You don't know your spirit until the universe asks, will you stay alive even when nothing makes sense? Early life wasn't given ideal conditions to evolve. It was handed near impossible odds. It didn't bloom in paradise. It struggled in the shadows. It didn't have sunlight, luxury, or resources. It had grit. That's where everything big in history starts. In hardship, in difficulty, conditions that look like failure, not opportunity. Think about the most powerful people in history. The inventors, the reformers, the leaders, the survivors. How many of them came from ease? Almost none. They came from wars, poverty, rejection, disadvantage, trauma. They rose not because life was good, but because they refused to break when life was merciless, found heat in the cracks, just like those early microbes did. And every one of us carries that same evolutionary legacy, the DNA of survivors, which is why it's almost tragic how often modern humans forget this. We panic over setbacks. We crumble at disappointment. We view inconvenience as injustice, as if struggle is a glitch rather than the very law of existence that shaped us. Life didn't evolve in paradise. Life evolved in hardship. Every cell in your body is the descendant of unimaginable perseverance. Yet we doubt ourselves over a bad month, a failed exam, a heartbreak, a job rejection. We freeze at discomfort, while our earliest ancestors literally survived the freezing of the entire planet. Let's be honest, we've romanticized resilience into slogans and self-help quotes. But true resilience isn't pretty. It's not a social media triumph or a motivational video. It's waking up when you don't want to. It's trying again when nothing worked yesterday. It's believing in warmth even when you're surrounded by ice. It's hanging on when survival isn't inspiring. It's exhausting. That's what early life did. That's what allowed evolution to continue. And that is exactly what every breakthrough in our world demands. Because resilience is rarely loud. It's quiet. It's in the breath you take when you feel like crying. In the step you take when you're tired of falling. In the decision to keep going when progress is invisible. Survive that ancient freeze not because it was strong, not because it had power, but because it persisted quietly, patiently, fiercely. And here's the moral sting. Survival often feels like failure while you're in it. It feels like stagnation, like suffocation, like waiting for the sun to return without knowing if it ever will. But survival is the seed of triumph. The story of Earth proves it. Every moment of endurance became a future of possibility. Imagine those tiny early organisms clinging to life under a world of ice. They didn't know that millions of years later, their stubborn survival would lead to trees, birds, whales, humans, music, laughter, architecture, space exploration. They weren't surviving for glory. They were surviving because that's what life does. It endures. It tries again. It protects its spark inside you. It's ancient. It's sacred. It comes from a lineage that refused extinction in a world so cold it made Antarctica look tropical. So when you face your own frozen periods, and you will remember that silence does not mean failure. Stillness does not mean stagnation. Hard seasons do not cancel your purpose. Sometimes life hides a way to rebuild. Sometimes your evolution is happening in the dark while you think nothing's changing. Sometimes the world has frozen around you, not to destroy you, to strengthen what will emerge when the thaw comes. People often think resilience means conquering. But resilience, in its purest form, means enduring long enough to reach the moment you can rise. not quitting when nothing improves, not surrendering when success is delayed, not believing the cold lies that whisper, "This is all you'll ever feel." That's a myth born from fear, a myth broken by evolution again and again. Every human being has encountered their own Snowball Earth moments. Times when life feels frozen, when opportunities seem sealed, when hope sits like a faint ember on the edge of going out. Times when you feel invisible, overlooked, forgotten, underestimated. But nothing invisible is meaningless. Nothing overlooked is powerless. Seeds grow in soil, not sunlight. Strength forms in adversity, not applause. People underestimate themselves because they judge strength only by visible success. But look at Earth's history. The most powerful evolutionary transformation happened when almost nothing visible was happening. Life wasn't expanding, it was hiding. It wasn't winning, it was waiting. Wasn't dominating, it was enduring. And that silent phase is what shaped everything. Survival sometimes looks like stillness, but stillness isn't surrender, it's strategy. When the world freezes around you, your job isn't to panic. Your job is to protect your inner flame, to conserve your strength, guard your purpose, breathe through the cold until heat returns. Because it will. The thaw always comes. It may take time, it may take patience, but winter is never eternal. Season after season proves this truth. And just like those early organisms need to know when the thaw will come, you don't need a timeline to keep believing. You just need the will to hold on, to say, "Not yet, not finished." There is a fierce dignity in surviving your coldest chapters, a quiet heroism in enduring what would have broken a weaker soul. The world only sees success at the thaw, but the most important victories happen in the freeze. So yes, early life retreated. It hid in cracks and shadows, tucked itself against volcanic warmth, sheltered in crevices beneath ice. It didn't give speeches about resilience. It didn't celebrate itself. It simply did what it had to do, stay alive. Sometimes survival isn't glamorous. Sometimes it's just breath by breath, day by day, keeping the spark lit. And because it did, we exist. The world as we know it, every tree, every poem, every heartbeat was born not in sunshine, but in ice. Not in abundance, but in scarcity. Not in comfort, but in struggle. You come from survivors. Your bloodline is persistence. Your body carries the memory of endurance, older than continents. Never forget that. Never underestimate that. And never confuse stillness with defeat or hardship with the end. Life survived a frozen earth. And because of that, you can survive what you are facing too. Not by being perfect, but by refusing to disappear. For millions of years, the world stayed frozen. Ice clamped down like a fist around the planet, choking oceans, burying continents, strangling the sky. And just when it seemed nothing could ever change, the silence of the frozen earth felt final. Something deep beneath the crust stirred. The ground trembled. Pressure built. Heat gathered in the darkness. And then, fire. Volcanoes erupted, politely, not quietly, but with a fury that only a desperate planet could unleash. They split open the surface of the earth, spewing molten rock, ash, and most importantly, gases. Carbon dioxide poured from the planet's lungs, rushing back into the atmosphere, slowly rebuilding the blanket Earth had lost. The same gas whose absence had plunged the world into deathly cold returned like a forgotten savior. It didn't happen overnight. The thaw did not arrive like a miracle sunrise. It crawled. It fought. It scraped against the ice with every eruption, every puff of volcanic breath. Imagine mountains vomiting fire into a world of white silence, heat against hopelessness, flame against frost, persistence against paralysis. Life clung on beneath the ice, waiting. and above the sky slowly thickened with coal again. The blanket reformed, molecule by molecule, breath, and as the atmosphere warmed, the ice began to soften. Cracks formed. Rivers trickled under frozen seas. Glaciers groaned, strained. Eventually, with a thunderous surrender, began to break. There's something almost poetic in that, something deeply human. Because if there's one thing this story should teach us, it's that recovery doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it begins underground, in silence, in pressure, in unseen fights. Always see healing happening. Until suddenly you wake up and realize you aren't frozen anymore. This planet didn't thaw because it wanted to, because pressure forced change, heat demanded release. And sometimes that's exactly how human transformation works. We don't suddenly become better because we decide to. We change because something inside us builds so intensely, so painfully, that staying trapped in the ice hurts more than breaking free. Surprising how often breakthroughs start as eruptions. Emotional, spiritual, mental. A job loss, a heartbreak, a frustration so deep it shakes your core. A moment where you slam your fist on your own limitations and say, enough. People look at volcanic moments in their lives and think they're collapsing. But often, those eruptions are the earth inside you saying, it's time, melt the ice. The thaw was messy, violent, chaotic. The surface didn't go quietly, it shattered. And so do we. Growth is rarely graceful. When you've been frozen too long, thawing hurts. Letting go hurts. Changing hurts. The old self doesn't release without a fight. But pain isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the pressure that cracks the ice. You know what's interesting? The very force that once cooled the earth, geological activity, was the same force that saved it. The same volcanoes whose eruptions helped strip sow and cool the planet earlier now erupted so relentlessly that they reheated it. The same mechanism that brought winter brought spring. In other words, the problem also contained the solution. Life's like that more often than we admit. The source of your struggle can become the source of your strength. Heartbreak that makes you wiser. Failure that makes you sharper, loss that makes you appreciate deeper, pain that forces you to grow up, level up, show up. We hate difficulty, but look at the planet. Difficulty isn't the enemy. Stagnation is. Silence is. Freezing is. When life erupts, when everything seems to be splitting apart, might be the moment the ice finally starts to melt. People always assume change arrives gently. It usually doesn't. Real transformation often erupts violently from the inside, while the outside world thinks you're breaking. But you're not breaking, you're waking. Earth woke up through volcanic fire. It didn't politely request a comeback. It roared. Slowly, painfully, undeniably, warmth returned. Ice retreated. Oceans re-liquefied. The world breathed again. It's funny. Everyone loves the thaw. Nobody wants the fire that causes it. Everyone wants rebirth, but recoil at the destruction that precedes it. Yet there is no rebirth without upheaval. The planet didn't warm back into comfort because conditions were safe. It warmed because conditions became intolerable for stagnation. Ask anyone who has rebuilt their life from the ashes. There's always a volcanic moment. A turning point where everything erupts and nothing stays the same. From the outside, it looks like chaos. Inside, it's transformation in motion. And if the earth could speak during those eruptions, maybe it would say the same thing countless people have whispered in their hardest moments. If I don't release this pressure, survive. Sometimes the world inside you must explode to save you. But here's the part that matters most. After the eruptions, After the turmoil, after the pain and chaos and shattering, warmth returned. The ice that once seemed eternal melted. The world thawed. And what followed was not simply survival, but advancement. Evolution exploded. Life didn't just return, it flourished like never before. The freeze didn't end life, it redefined it. There is a profound truth there, one many people miss. The struggle that nearly destroys you often prepares you for the greatest growth of your life. The darkness isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it is the womb of the future. Look at the sequence. Pressure built, fire erupted, ice cracked, waters moved, and then bloomed beyond anything the frozen world could ever have imagined. You are no different. You think your breaking point is the end, but often it's the beginning. You think pressure means collapse, but sometimes it means you're about to evolve. You think feeling lost means you've failed, but really it means you're stepping into unknown ground, and evolution only happens in the unknown. The volcanoes didn't come to destroy the world. They came to restart it. Sometimes you don't need comfort. Sometimes you need ignition. Sometimes the universe doesn't whisper, it erupts. Sometimes life doesn't nudge, it jolts. And sometimes your greatest breakthroughs begin with something inside you shaking so violently you think you're falling apart, only to realize you're finally breaking out. So if your world is rumbling, if pressure is building, if emotions feel like magma rising, maybe you're not collapsing. Maybe you're thawing. Maybe you're shedding the ice that kept you stuck. Maybe your fire is returning. The world did not stay frozen because it was once cold. It thawed because warmth fought its way back. And every one of us carries that truth inside us. What freezes can melt. What breaks can rebuild. What goes quiet can roar again. The earth didn't just thaw, it came back burning. When your thaw arrives, you will too. When the ice finally surrendered, when the glaciers shrank back like wounded giants, when the oceans awakened from their frozen silence and the world took its first warm breath in nearly 100 million years. Something extraordinary happened, something so profound that it would shape every future heartbeat, every evolving form, every creature that would ever walk, swim, crawl, or fly. Life didn't simply return, it exploded, surged forward with a ferocity and creativity the planet had never seen before. Biologists call it the Cambrian explosion, but that phrase doesn't do it justice. It wasn't a polite revelation, it was a planetary roar, a declaration that life refuses to bow, a reminder that even after the longest winter, the world doesn't just thaw, it transforms. Species appeared at a pace nature had never witnessed. Complex bodies, eyes, jaws, limbs, defenses, strategies, movement, intelligence, diversity like fireworks across the oceans. The creatures that crawled out of that era weren't fragile survivors. They were champions, forged in unimaginable adversity. They were life sharpened by crisis. They were strength born of suffering. That is the message this chapter of Earth's history whispers. No, shouts to every one of us. The hardest times don't break you. They prepare you. Romanticize comfort, don't we? We worship stability, predictability. We crave safety, familiarity. But comfort never forged greatness. Comfort never forced innovation. Nothing evolves in a warm bath. No one discovers who they are while wrapped in ease. It's always the storm, the struggle, the harsh winter. That is where power is born. Think about humanity's greatest leaps. They came after plagues, wars, economic collapses, moments when everything seemed lost, when people felt frozen in fear, frozen in uncertainty, frozen in despair. And yet somehow, as if echoing the planet's ancient memory, they emerged stronger. World War II ended, and the world invented computers, built the UN, moved toward global cooperation, and launched rockets into space. The 2008 recession shattered economies, and from its ashes came modern fintech, digital entrepreneurship, renewable energy booms. Every personal struggle you've ever faced, heartbreak, failure, grief, humiliation, every time you thought you'd never thaw, never breathe freely again, never feel sunlight on your spirit, and yet here you are. And let's be honest, the moments that shaped you weren't the easy ones. The people who stand confident today didn't get there because life handed them comfort. They earned themselves through fire. You didn't learn strength from happiness. You learned it from pain. You didn't discover loyalty from praise. You discovered it from betrayal. You didn't gain resilience from peace. You gained it from adversity. When Earth thawed, it didn't return to what it was. It became something completely new. That's the point. History is quietly demanding. We hear you are not meant to go back to who you were before your winter. You are meant to evolve into someone stronger. There's another truth buried in this story, one we need to face with fearless honesty. When the ice melted, life didn't wait. It didn't hesitate. It didn't ask permission. It surged forward the moment opportunity appeared. It didn't dwell on the past million years of suffering. It didn't sit in reflection for eternity. It took its chance and sprinted. Life didn't waste the thaw. It used it. How many of us thaw slowly but act slowly too? We survive the storm, but we tiptoe back into the world with caution, fear, hesitation. Crisis passes, yet we cling to our trauma like a badge instead of using the strength it gave us. We waste the comeback moment. The Earth didn't. It saw freedom and literally exploded with potential. It didn't rebuild the old world. It ushered in a new one. And that raises a question each of us must answer. When your winter ends, will you crawl or will you burst into life? Think of the moments in your life where you held yourself back after enduring the hardest season of your existence. You survived something you thought would break you. Heartbreak, injustice, isolation, disappointment, illness, failure. But instead of bursting forward, you hesitated. You doubted yourself, feared the world would freeze again. You waited for permission to bloom. Life waited 100 million years for warmth. It did not waste a second once it arrived. That's the difference between merely surviving and truly rising. This chapter of Earth's story isn't only about endurance, it's about readiness. It's about seizing the first moment where the ice cracks and saying, "This is my time." It's about honoring your suffering by refusing to stay small when the world finally opens again. There is still another layer to this story, an emotional one, a deeply human one. Imagine the first tiny organisms that endured the ice. They didn't know if warmth would return. They didn't evolve with certainty. They evolved on faith. The most basic, ancient faith life possesses. Keep going, keep holding on, keep adapting. Something better might come. We think faith is a human invention, but the universe practiced it long before we did. Life always bet on the future, even when the present was unbearable. That's what makes this story more than geology and glaciation. It's a mirror, a metaphor, a reminder that hope isn't naive. It's ancient and scientific. Without hope, nothing evolves. Endurance, nothing survives. Without belief, nothing blossoms after winter. We all face emotional ice ages, times when everything freezes. Ambition, joy, possibility. Times where days feel like years, progress feels impossible, and you wonder whether warmth will ever return. But the Earth teaches us that no winter, no matter how long, truly lasts forever. The thaw always comes. The question is never if, only when. And when it does, what will you do with your second chance? or your 7th, or your 100th? Will you emerge timid or transformed? You cling to who you were or fight to become who you could be? When the ice melts in your life, melt with it. When warmth returns, grow with it. When opportunity cracks open, surge like life did after Snowball Earth. You weren't made to just survive your winters. You were made to become a force because of them. The planet did not endure 100 million years of ice to return unchanged, and neither did you. And so, when we look back at this unimaginable chapter in our planet's history, this world once swallowed by ice, silenced by cold, left in stillness for longer than humanity can even comprehend, we see more than geology. We see more than climate and chemistry and ancient rock. We see ourselves. The story of Snowball Earth isn't just a story about a frozen world. It's a story about survival in the face of the impossible. It's a story about fighting when the silence tells you it's pointless. It's a story about being buried, pressured, pushed to the edge, and then erupting back into life anyway. Didn't quit. It didn't surrender. It endured. It broke. It rebuilt. It evolved. And from that unimaginable cold came the greatest burst of life the world had ever seen. Is not a coincidence. That is a lesson. Your world can freeze. Your hopes can stall. Your dreams can be buried under years of stillness. People may doubt you. You may doubt yourself. Seasons of your life can feel endless, cruel, silent, unforgiving. But winter is not the end. Stillness is not death. Pressure is not failure. Even when everything looks frozen, change is happening beneath the surface. And when your thaw comes, and it will, don't just return. Don't simply survive. Rise, expand. Become more than you were before the cold came. The deepest struggles aren't punishment. They are preparation. The longest winters create the strongest springs. What feels like silence may be shaping your roar. So walk forward today carrying one truth. If an entire planet can freeze and come back stronger, so can you. Let your hardships refine you, not define you. Let your battles build you, not break you. Melt the ice, release the pressure, erupt into life. And when your moment comes, don't just step into the light, explode into it. Because like this Earth, not here to merely survive history, you are here to make it.